You're not stuck because you lack motivation. You're stuck because you turned emotion into a requirement. While you wait to feel ready, time fragments your days, your projects, and your consistency. And the longer you wait for the right internal state, the less evidence you build that you're capable of acting without it. The problem isn't energy. It's the rule you accepted without noticing. There's a belief deeply embedded in modern self-improvement culture. First comes the feeling, then comes the action. It sounds reasonable. It sounds healthy. It sounds like self-awareness. If you don't feel driven, maybe it's not the right moment. Maybe you need clarity. Maybe you haven't found your true purpose yet. Motivation became the gatekeeper. Without it, you don't begin. Without it, you don't sustain. Without it, you assume effort will be wasted. This narrative is everywhere. Books, podcasts, corporate talks, productivity content, casual conversations. The message is consistent. Find something that truly motivates you, and everything becomes easier. If you're not producing, you lack motivation. If you quit, you lost motivation. If you're stuck, you haven't found the thing that excites you enough. It's a clean explanation because it turns difficulty into an emotional issue. If the problem is how you feel, then the solution is to feel differently. But look at the actual sequence of your behavior. How many times have you started something without wanting to, and a few minutes later, resistance dropped? How many times did clarity appear after you were already engaged? How many times did focus show up after movement, not before? In many cases, motivation doesn't precede action, it follows it. But you were taught to invert that order. If you only act when motivated, you drastically reduce how often you begin. Fewer beginnings mean fewer completions. Fewer completions mean fewer tangible results. And without results, your confidence weakens. A quiet loop forms. No action without motivation, no motivation without action. The belief promises emotional optimization. What it delivers is structural inconsistency. Look at anyone who stays consistent for years. They don't wake up inspired every day. They don't operate under permanent enthusiasm. They don't wait for the ideal internal climate. They execute in neutral states, sometimes in negative ones. If motivation were truly required at the start, long-term consistency would be impossible. But this idea creates resistance, because if motivation isn't required before action, responsibility shifts. It's no longer about lacking a feeling, it becomes about choosing to act without it. That's uncomfortable. Many people build their identity around passion, purpose, inspiration. Accepting that action can exist without enthusiasm sounds mechanical, cold, less meaningful. Predictable rationalizations appear. I don't want to live on autopilot. I need to feel aligned. I don't want to force myself. These statements sound thoughtful, but often they conceal something simpler. Discomfort with the idea that emotion does not hold final authority. There's also fear of burnout, the quick assumption that acting without motivation means endless self-forcing, ignoring limits, suppressing fatigue. But that leap protects the belief, because abandoning motivation as a prerequisite removes a socially acceptable excuse, and losing a comfortable excuse is rarely pleasant. Now consider the accumulated effect over time. When motivation becomes the filter for action, time fragments. Productive days when you feel inspired, stalled days when you don't. projects launched under emotional highs that collapse under ordinary lows, plans redesigned repeatedly because the internal state never feels ideal enough. In the short term, this looks normal. Over years, it becomes a pattern. Years filled with emotionally intense beginnings, few neutral continuations. The sense of untapped potential remains intact because there's always the thought, when I'm truly motivated, I'll do it. That future state rarely gets fully tested. Meanwhile, someone who acts regardless of emotional fluctuation accumulates small repetitions, small executions, small completions. Nothing cinematic, nothing heroic, just repetition. And repetition, sustained quietly over years, creates differences that initially seem invisible, but eventually become undeniable. No dramatic turning point, no grand speech, no emotional breakthrough, just consistency. Perhaps motivation isn't the villain. Perhaps it's simply overrated. The problem isn't feeling something. The problem is placing feeling as the entry requirement for action. When you demand motivation before movement, you outsource your discipline to something unstable. Emotions fluctuate, mood shifts, energy rises and falls, and your output rises and falls with them. Then you label that instability lack of motivation. But maybe the more accurate term is different. Maybe it's emotional dependence disguised as self-awareness. Because starting without desire reveals something the belief protects you from seeing. You can act without feeling ready. And if you can act without feeling ready, waiting loses its legitimacy. That removes the elegant delay, the refined justification, the socially acceptable explanation. It leaves only an uncomfortable question. If you didn't need motivation to act, what would stop being an excuse? There is no method here, no step-by-step solution, no promise of transformation. Only the possibility that the game was never about feeling ready in the first place. And maybe you keep waiting for motivation, not because it's necessary, but because acting without it would force you to confront something you've avoided testing.